is a sourdough loaf that I made from local grains. And when I say local, I mean just a few miles from here. So you just saw my beautiful loaf of sourdough bread made from Steel Wheel Farm hard red spring wheat. And it is beautiful and delicious. I wish I could actually share some with you. So I wanted to talk about wheat. Let's talk about wheat. Wheat and gluten in particular are pretty much demonized in some circles in the nutrition world in which I live. A lot of nutritionists believe that we should completely eliminate gluten-containing grains from the diet. And I'm not in that camp. Humans have been eating wheat for thousands of years. And it's only recently that we've seen this huge rise in celiac disease, other autoimmune conditions potentially related to wheat and gluten, gluten sensitivities, gluten allergies. Wheat has changed, but humans have not changed. The common thread among the rise is the breeding of modern wheat. Modern wheat was developed to grow for yield and storage. It's not grown for nutrient density. It's not grown for deliciousness. But isn't that what we want in food? Monocrops or large-scale agriculture growing wheat, they're growing under conditions that require synthetic fertilizers, pesticides. These things are contaminating the environment. The residual of these pesticides ending up in the food supply. And I don't think that's safe for anyone to be eating. If we're putting things on food to destroy other things and then it ends up in our body, not good. So what do you look for when you're at the store buying bread or buying crackers? Look for whole wheat, look for ancient or heritage grains, look for locally grown grains, look for grains grown from small farms. Avoid the refined flour products. Look for sprouted, look for sourdough, look for naturally leavened, but also read labels, because sometimes you might be buying a sourdough bread that's not actually a true sourdough. It might have a sour taste to it, but it might just be a mass-produced yeasted quick bread. Refined flour is stripped of its nutrients. It's stripped of the fat and protein. It's stripped of the fiber. Refined flours have no flavor. The flavor is in the fat. The flavor is in the protein of the grain, and that's missing in a refined flour. What else can you do? You can make your own bread. You can make your own sourdough. I think over the last decade here in the Pacific Northwest, there's been this wheat uprising where lots of small local farms have been growing wheat. And I think it's so exciting because, you know, everyone I think thinks that grain is grown in a dry, hotter climate. And here in the Pacific Northwest, we get a good amount of rain. But there are so many varieties of wheat, and there are wheat varieties that grow well here in the Pacific Northwest. And so that's what these farmers are finding out. They're growing it, they're doing it successfully, they're partnering with local bakeries that are making breads from all local wheat. And that is just so cool. One of my favorite farmers, Farmer Ryan from Steelwell Farm, is now growing wheat. This was his first year growing, and we are going to take a little field trip down to Steelwell Farm and talk to Farmer Ryan about the wheat that he grew. This is Ryan from Steelwell Farm. He has a farm in Fall City. How long have you farmed here, Ryan?
This is our 11th season farming.
Wow!
Yeah.
11 years.
Pretty incredible. And we didn't start on this property, but just adjacent to here. So this probably 8 years here.
So farming is super hard work. What drew you to this?
I love hard work. I love being outside. I love growing things in the dirt, in the soil, and nurturing plants. And I love feeding people. So it's a perfect career for me. And I love machinery.
Okay. Yeah, and you're kind of a science nerd because the whole soil thing is very sciencey.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yep. Kind of a gearhead. I like to turn wrenches and work on things. Yeah.
So this is the first year that you've grown wheat.
Yeah, super exciting. So we've been growing vegetables up until this point since the beginning. And we've always been looking for crops to diversify our operation with. And now we're kind of to the size where we can rotate out some of our heavily produced vegetable cropland into fallow or grain crops. And this is a way for us to harvest a cover crop and still make money on it and grow food. Grains are kind of the perfect balance with vegetables. Vegetables are really heavy nutrient feeders, and the grains don't feed quite as much as the vegetables do. But it also allows us to let the ground rest for a period of time before we put vegetables back in.
What kind of wheat are you growing?
This year was our first year growing wheat, and we grew a variety that it's a hard red spring wheat that is rust resistant, which is good on this side of the mountains because we have a lot of moisture, and especially earlier in the spring and early summer. So I was a little bit worried about disease, also some insect pressure. So this wheat was better for some of those conditions. So I figured I'd pick a safe variety. But the hard red spring wheat is planted in the springtime, pretty much as early as you can work soil. I think this year we planted right around the end of April, and we had a dry spell, so the seed went in the ground. We had 7 acres plowed up and tilled, ready to go. Unfortunately, it was virgin soil, so there were a lot of perennial weeds that we hadn't worked out of the soil, and growing crops without pesticides or chemicals, growing organically, we have to fight with some of those perennial weeds and nutrient deficiencies that present themselves with newly turned soils.
And you aren't certified organic, but you do grow certified naturally grown. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, I'd love to. The certified naturally grown certification parallels the organic certification, but it's a little bit different. It's not through USDA, it's through a nonprofit organization that's based over on the East Coast, and they cater to small diversified farming operations that want to take care of the earth and treat it with care. They also want to grow things without chemicals and pesticides, no GMO seeds, but also create a sense of community. So it's a peer-reviewed certification. We have other farmers that are certified come to our farm at the beginning of the year, yearly and inspect our farm. We talk about our growing practices, the kind of insects we're seeing around the farm throughout the year, different weed pressures. And it's really a chance for us to share observations and growing practices with our neighbors that we rarely get to see because we're so busy farming. We don't have that the time to be able to communicate and hang out. So it creates more of that community aspect that I really like. At the same time, it educates our customers on how we grow, shows them our growing practices. It's a conversation starter. A lot of people don't know what certified naturally grown is, and a lot of people know what the organic certification is or what it means. So it drums up conversation at the farmers markets, and I feel like throughout the years of being certified, it hasn't really made a difference being certified organic or certified naturally grown in the eyes of the consumer, as long as they trust me, my growing practices, and that's what's most important, is if you know your farmer and know how they're growing the food and treating the earth with care.
Are you selling wheat at the farmers market? Who's your customer for this wheat that you're now growing?
Yeah, so we didn't harvest quite as much wheat as I had hoped, but we ended up with maybe 1,400 pounds on 4 acres, which is a low yield. But it's not about the yield, it's about actually accomplishing what we set out to do. So we have wheat. It is available now at the farmers markets. We're also going to put it on our online store we're going to launch next week. Ideally, the wheat is used for bread making, flour, and we're marketing it to small restaurants, kind of a niche audience, restaurants that bake their own breads, the home customer who has like a small grain mill in their kitchen and wants fresh flour, wants that whole grain wheat to bake with. Those are our main customers that we see that want to buy our wheat. But I'm super excited about the wheat project, and it allows us to rotate our vegetable crops. Now, we can set aside 7 acres of our vegetable land, grow wheat on it next year, and then the land that we grew wheat on this year will turn into vegetable ground for a few years while we rotate the wheat crop.
And that's part of the process of building soil, and right?
Exactly. Every crop extracts or deposits different nutrients, and through the rotation of crops we can help balance those nutrients in the soil by adding more carbon and organic material. So all of the straw that came off of the grain, we're going to till that back into the ground, and that's adding more carbon. So every time we till the soil or grow crops, we're extracting nutrients and carbon from the soil. We want to put that back in and give the soil a rest. Let the microorganisms establish themselves and create colonies. It's a very complex system that we're just, starting to understand a little bit more.
Yeah.
Tina, typically grain crops are grown back to back. So the larger operations in Eastern Washington, all they really can grow is maybe wheat because of the dry conditions, and wheat grows really well there. But they're constantly stripping those nutrients out of the ground by growing the same crop. So there is the need to rotate different crops in cropland.
And wouldn't that mean that the nutrient density of the wheat they're growing isn't as high as wheat grown in where you're rotating crops?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Depleted nutrients equals depleted nutrients in food. And they're not really in it to make the healthiest amount of wheat. Conventional growers typically grow wheat for yield. They get paid by the pound or the bushel. We're not striving to get maximum bushels per acre here. I'm striving to get quality grain with lots of nutrients. One of my passions is to have nutrient-dense food, to really feed people good, nutritious food, not just filler. Most of the nutrients in the grain is actually in the bran on the outside of the grain, and most processed flours, that's all extracted from it. Unless you reintroduce nutrients or reintroduce that bran, you're skipping out on all those minerals and beneficial vitamins. So by taking our wheat and making it flour, whole wheat flour, whole grain. You're extracting all those nutrients and using them in your baking products. You're going to benefit from all of that, all those concentrated minerals and vitamins.
I love your passion around that.
Here we have the wheat in its whole form. I picked some and saved it so it wasn't all combined, but the wheat is inside chaff here, and there's the wheat berry, just like that.
So cool.
Yeah, so this process is pretty involved. You could, as a home grower, grow your own wheat and thresh it in your backyard. What you would do is take the whole wheat stalks like this, put down a tarp or in a bucket, and then have a dowel or a stick, and you'd hit the tops of the wheat so it would fall out of all of the chaff and separate it from the straw.
It sounds like a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, unless you're doing it on a small scale. On a larger scale, we have use of a combine. And a combine essentially does the same thing, but it's all mechanized. The combine cuts the wheat, threshes it, and separates the chaff and the stalks with the use of shakers and blowers. So it uses air to push out the light material and shakers and screens to sift out the grain. And then it collects all the grain and all the weed seeds, I found out, and puts it in a big hopper, and then when the hopper's full, we can empty it. The next process would be screening the seeds. We were lucky enough to borrow a seed cleaner from the 1940s to separate all the weed seed from the actual wheat, and it came out pretty clean. So I can show you that right here. So here we actually have the whole red wheat, and it's dried. We sent the sample up to the bred lab in Skagit, and they tested it at 16.4% protein, which is really high, which is good. It means it'll make a really nice bread.
Nice bread, yeah.
Yeah, and this is the seed after it came through the seed cleaner.
I was just reading that there's roughly 30,000 different types of wheat. Okay, so that's just wheat alone, but think about other vegetables like broccoli. How many varieties are there? There's so many that some are extinct because people aren't growing them anymore because they're just growing for uniformity and not color
or vitamin C or any of that other stuff usually. But that's the greatest thing about organic farming and choosing seeds that are grown in your region, because a lot of times seeds that are grown in Washington and created in Washington have better pest resistance for this region, or have more disease resistance to the damp climates that we have. So that's really important. We always source our seeds from local seed companies around here in the Pacific Northwest. They seem to do a lot better.
How do you choose varieties?
By the name. No. Yeah, they sell really well when the name is like caribou russet potato.
Yeah.
Or, no, sometimes that plays in
I do that.
factor, but typically I look for days of maturity, color, because we sell at the farmers markets a lot. I like different textures and colors, and usually like a really dark green broccoli, for instance, is probably going to be way more nutritious than something that's pale and kind of yellow. People are attracted to those dark, rich colors. I think that's instinctual when we're looking for produce too, is if it looks really healthy, probably is.
Yeah.
Our eyes are trained to look for healthy things in food.
And we're trained to do that. That's our natural instinct,
right.
But we're conditioned to go for other things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Marketing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What's your vision for your farm? I mean, you've done this 11 years. Now you're adding in wheat. You're growing. You have a corn maze this year to bring in more of the community to, celebrate fall on your farm. But what is your vision?
Yeah. my vision has always kind of been the same, to grow and sell food to people, to grow really healthy food. That's the most satisfying thing, when somebody comes back to you and says, this is the best vegetable I've ever had, or I'm only shopping here at your stand because I feel so healthy. That gives me really a lot of joy in farming. Farming is not the most lucrative thing that I could be doing, but it's very rewarding. And we're doing the corn maze this year to help maybe bring in some more awareness of our farm, and also bring in a little more cash so we can buy more seeds and plant more wheat and condition land to be suitable for growing vegetables. It takes at least 5 years of conditioning soil to work out the perennial weeds, the seed bank that's there, the insect problems in the soil that we have, to set up infrastructure and to mineralize the land that's been neglected for so many years. If you look at a piece of pasture, it might look very healthy, but you don't really know until you take a soil test or you analyze the plants that are actually growing. Most of the plants out here growing are weeds. They may not be bad because they're adding nutrients that are lacking in the soil. But those aren't the types of plants we want to compete with. So it takes a long time. I think farming is a long-term endeavor, and 10 years flies by like that. So if I'm here for another 10 years, I have dreams of beautiful rows of vegetables and really healthy crops and a nice rotation plan in place. I feel like every year we're evolving and changing and trying to adapt with Mother Nature, which is really tough. And we're in a floodplain, so we've got that to factor in. But finding a work-life balance is a major goal of mine, and continuing to grow good food. So with the pandemic, things have changed a little bit in our marketing.
That's what I wanted to ask
strategy.
you. Yeah.
So we're seeing less sales through our restaurant outlets as well as our markets. Folks are afraid to go shopping at the market, even at the grocery store. So we've seen on-site farm stand sales go up a little bit. We're going to create the online store, which is going to really help people access some of our food. And then we're wholesaling a little bit more. We're seeing a lot more CSA or box packing delivery options, and companies pop up and they want to buy produce from us and other local farms. So we're still growing a lot of food and we're moving it. It's just a little bit different avenue. And because we're a small operation, we can be really flexible and adapt to the changes, which is important. We also grow some pork, and we're planning on having a few beef cows here. Grain is a great feed and a sustainable feed when it's grown on your own farm to feed animals, especially if it looks like this full of weed seeds. Can't really sell that, but the animals love it. A lot of nutrients in all those seeds, even if they're weeds. So the pigs will be really happy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, I think that's a long-winded version of my vision. But really our mission is to feed people and change the way food is grown, harvested, distributed. And I want to create jobs. I want to create more farmers and teach people. I'm still learning myself. And I had no family that would pass down all the education to me about farming. I'm first generation, so I missed out on a lot of information. So I'm learning the hard way.
Okay, where can people find you?
Folks can find us online at steelwheelfarm.com. Also, we have an online store through the farmers markets, through the Neighborhood Farmers Market Association. We have a few products listed there, including our wheat. And then next week we're going to launch our own store through Tend Agriculture, which is our farming software. So if you're interested, contact us and we can send you the link.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna buy some of this wheat so that I can take it home and make some bread.
Yeah, you should.
So let's do that. I appreciate you standing in the sun at the peak, basically like the height of harvest season, to talk to me today. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
My
Ryan.
pleasure. Thanks, Tina.
Yeah.
So I think farmers are some of the most thoughtful, intelligent people. And Ryan is no exception. Anyone that wants to grow food to feed people, that just gets me here. So if you are in the area, please come by Steelwell Farm, check out his website. And if you're not local, find your local farmer. So what's it like driving this down the street?
It's terrifying. But you feel like you're the king of the world. All right, Tina, fire it up.